Hi everybody, I'm meteorologist Matt Gray. Welcome to another edition of the Brainstorm, and tonight what we're going to do is expound a little bit more about some of the climate cycle related stories that we've done this week, which is that we are expecting a change to cooler weather and wetter weather, not just for the last week of February, which, by the way, we talked about a couple weeks ago, and lo and behold, here it is, it's coming true. But we are also going to be talking about March, how it looks like March could end up being quite an active month around here, and some of the reasons why. And kind of relate that back to La Niña a little bit. So over the past 6 weeks, it has been very much not La Niña-like around the inland Northwest. And on Thursday, on 4 News Now, we talked briefly about why. Here's the typical La Niña pattern where you've got the jet stream coming from the north, you got a good feed of moisture here as all that activity, all the storms work around high pressure off the southern coast of Alaska. And so we end up with a pretty wet and pretty cool pattern. Once again, it's not every day that this happens, but it is more often than not that we see this situation. Well, here's the past 6 weeks, and it has been totally opposite. And the reason why is that whole pattern of high pressure has shifted over a few hundred, couple thousand, or 1,000 miles or so. And so what we've ended up more often than not is strong high pressure over the west, and then all the active weather has been going into the Midwest and the East instead. So once again, La Niña, when we talk about it and we talk about what kind of weather we could see, that is the most likely scenario. The weather patterns are still going to move around and they're still going to do what they do, but these types of climate cycles like La Niña and El Niño, when we talk about them, we're talking about the idea that these types of patterns are going to show up in these areas more often than not. And we can get a good idea of that when we look at the 6 weeks before that, November 27th through about January 8th, really when winter started for us and kind of when winter part one ended after that big storm in the first week of January where we got all that snow and all the passes were closed down. High pressure was much further away, and so we were right in the path of the jet stream here. And before that, well, we were kind of the same, except it was a little bit warmer, and we had these atmospheric rivers. So all of this combined means we still have a month or two, or really about 50, 60 days, to see some of this La Niña winter pattern pull itself together again. And after that, the influence of La Niña in the springtime and the La Niña conditions in the Pacific itself is actually going to be waning as we go through the spring. So we're going to start to see that influence, or any potential influence in the background of La Niña, begin to fade during the springtime. But here we are in the month of March, kind of winter, a little bit of spring, a little bit of winter you get in March around here. So we are below average for temperatures in the forecast from the Climate Prediction Center, and a good chance of above average moisture, especially across the inland Northwest and other inland portions of the PNW and into western Montana and Oregon as well. All places that desperately could use some moisture after this pretty dry 6 weeks. So it is not just about the next week worth of weather where we expect it to be snowier and colder, but also in the month to come. And there's a couple of reasons why. Let's start off with everybody's favorite weather acronym that nobody heard of until about 10 years ago, the polar vortex. There's actually a really interesting mechanism that destabilizes said polar vortex. There's actually two polar vortexes, but we'll get to that in a minute. But when we are looking for basically, hey, the polar vortex is coming, we want to look for temperatures in the second layer of the atmosphere, the stratosphere. That's where the ozone layer is. That's where a lot of jet planes end up flying, or at the higher end of the cruising altitude of jet aircraft is in the stratosphere. So that's one layer above what's called the troposphere. That's where we all live, and that's where most of the clouds and the weather and all that stuff, that's where most of the action actually happens. But yeah, right above that, you do get some airplanes that fly into the stratosphere, and that's where the ozone layer is. And fun fact, the stratosphere is actually warmer then the troposphere actually warms as you get higher up. Of course, it's not a lot of air up there, so it's still going to feel pretty cold if you ended up out of the plane. Plus, you couldn't breathe. But anyway, sidetrack over here. So basically what we look for when we talk about, hey, the polar vortex might be paying us a visit, is something called sudden stratospheric warming. And it's basically in a matter of a couple of days, we can see a 50-degree or higher jump in the temperatures in the stratosphere. And we use satellites to measure that. And we have, just like all other types of weather, we have computer models that give us an idea of what's going on. And by the way, look at this graph here. So this is for the entire northern hemisphere, from the equator to the North Pole. Look at the last time that there was this really quick warming of the stratosphere. It was late December and early January. What happened then? What was going on around here then? Oh, yeah, some of the coldest weather we had seen in years around the inland northwest. And then we had all that active weather and that big snow to start off the month of January. So look, it isn't guaranteed that when we have these, that super cold weather is going to pay our part of the world a visit, but it usually means that things will get a little wild in the weather in the days and weeks following these events of sudden stratospheric warming. And the computer models there in the green line are showing that. So that's something we're going to be watching for over the next couple of weeks. And it is a good indicator that we might be seeing more outbreaks of pretty frigid air, at least somewhere around the North Pole. And that includes us. So we'll have a chance at least to see some cooler air next month. And I think we're going to have a pretty good chance, and I'll show you some other stuff coming up. But this is what we're talking about. So this sudden stratospheric warming, it weakens the stratospheric polar vortex, which is strong winds that are whipping around way, way high up above the North Pole. Now, there's also the tropospheric polar vortex, which is, we call it the jet stream, is another name for it. And, when you get north of the jet stream, you usually end up in pretty chilly air this time of the year. And when you're south of it, you usually end up in pretty warm air. And that jet stream has been way, way up north in Canada because of the high pressure that's been sitting over us. So a lot of things get messy down in the troposphere. A lot of different weather features are interacting. But the big thing is when the stratospheric polar vortex weakens, all of a sudden, the polar vortex below it, down in the troposphere, weakens as well. It gets really wavy, and that means that cold air, it starts sliding to the south. So things get pretty weird in weather. So that's what we're going to be looking for in the next month. And with the computers hinting at some stratospheric warming coming up, that means that we have an opportunity to be quite chilly in the month of March. So that's something that we're going to keep an eye on. We're also keeping an eye on the weekly weather models. The blue here means cold with active weather. The red and the purple means high pressure and calm and sunny weather. So that's something that we're going to be watching here. You notice this is the upcoming week here, Monday through the 24th of February, 17th to the 24th of February here. So through the weekend and then into early next week. And what do you know? Cooler weather, and that's exactly what we have in our forecast. And that high pressure moving up towards Alaska. Now notice what happens here as we go through this animation. Things warm up for the first week of March, but then look at what happens at the end of the month. Watch this animation go through. Watch this animation keep going through. That's right. The trophy weather, the cool weather, the active weather returns to the west, and specifically to us in the northwest, and it sticks around for the better part of 2 weeks. More noticeably is that really strong high pressure ends up around Alaska. So this is a sign for us that more often than not in the month of March, it looks like the overall pattern is going to be set up for us to have some cooler and wetter weather, more active conditions around the inland northwest. So that's what we're looking at. Everything kind of lining up here, multiple lines of evidence. That's what we want to look for. We want to look for not just one thing saying something, go, whoa, that means exactly what it's going to happen. We want to look at multiple strings of evidence, connect the dots together and go, hey, this is probably what we're going to watch out for. So do not be surprised at all if we end up with a pretty active month of March with weather. Maybe not in the first half of the month, but gonna have to keep an eye on the second half. So that is the brainstorm. love talking about these long-term climate things because it's just fun. It's fun to think about. It's fun to talk about. And we all get to figure out together what happens. After all, we don't know the extent of the individual weather systems that will come along, but we know, at least as we go on a week-by-week basis, hey, week to week, month to month, 2-week periods, we know what's more likely than not. So, hey, thanks for watching, everybody. And if you like this video, we've got more weather content that we upload here every week on the 4 News Now YouTube page. We keep you updated on your forecast. We keep you updated on the news that's going on around Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, and the rest of the inland Northwest. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button below, and we will talk to you soon.